It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Hello, howdy, howdy, ho, hey, 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 hee, ha, 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 ho. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? How are ya? Great show for you today. Our interview is with a guy I'm very excited to have on. His name is D. Grant Smith, and he is the creator and host of a radio show called The Appetizer Radio Show, which he does something very near to my heart, is that he plays lots of indie music. He kind of is doing the old style FM from the 70s of doing albums, except I guess he has some issues with the FCC that they only allowed you to play 2 or 3 album tracks, per show or something like that. But he's doing that kind of old style of, real featured artist and playing several songs. And I really like that. I really appreciate that he's doing that. He's also an author. He's got a book out. It's a DIY musician's guide, which I highly recommend any DIY indie artist musician to pick up the book and read it, because it's got some great tips on how you can improve your fan base and generally become more successful as a DIY musician. Speaking of that, before we get to D. Grant, we've got a band that I want to feature a song of. They were nice enough to send it in. And this band is called The North. They're going to be a guest on the show probably in September. We're just working out the details now to get the interview done. The band consists of vocalist Ryan Sullivan, Ted Kellier on drums, Dennis Harris on bass, and guitarist Carlisle Crenshaw. And they're a good old-fashioned sort of rock and roll band. Influences from Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and some of the grunge bands like Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. They will be appearing at the Viper Room on August 6th, which is in West Hollywood, California, 8852 West Sunset Boulevard. Please contact the venue for tickets and times. We have a song today called Inside Out, which is the first track off of their EP called The North EP. So here is The North and Inside Out.
Rummismaði kletta gjá, kaldri vetrar nóttu á, verður margt að meini.
Traveling through the tundras of Iceland, through the fjords of Norway, all the way to the assembly line at the Volvo plant in Sweden, from the home of ABBA, our very own Olaf Fjörgerson. Okay, Olaf, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you with us again. I understand that you brought a couple of songs with you that you wanted to have featured on the show. As you know, I'm always happy to play indie music and new music. I'm very excited that you brought some songs that you wanted to share with us. We're pretty flexible as far as genre is concerned. You know, as long as it's good music, that's really my only qualifications. So let me hear what you've got. What have you got for us today?
Oh, tack Douglas. Tack för att ha mig tillbaka på din show. Jag har 3 riktigt bra låtar som jag har väldigt mycket tacksam om du kunde spela på din show. Alla dessa låtar är fantastiska och jag är säker på din amerikanska politiken kommer att älska dem.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Always happy to do it. So why don't we just listen to the first song that you got? Can you give us the title of the first one, please?
Den kallas för Oh My God av några norska killar.
Oh, Norwegians, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's listen to this one. All right, here we go. This is Oh My God.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm looking for a sailor.
Oh my God, I'm looking for the sea.
Oh my God. I'm looking for a sailor.
I hope he does find his sailor anyways. No, that doesn't quite do it. What else have you got, Olaf?
Okej, kanske du kommer att gilla den här nästa bättre. Den är riktigt supersång. Jag spelar den hela tiden. Jag älskar verkligen den här sången. Jag tror att du ska komma att älska den också. Den kallas för Jag är en fattig bondedräng.
Really? Fucking Boondebring, huh? Okay. All right, let's have a listen to this one.
Jag är en gammal fiskargubbe heter Ulla Fanet. Jag har sån reumatism i ryggen och ont i ena knä. Nu är jag både trött och tung och blicken min den är slö. Men jag har också varit ung och trotsat storm och skön.
Yeah, well, okay, Olaf. I don't know. I think I like the first song better. This is good music, huh? This is really really good stuff, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you say so. All right. Well, that's not really what we want for the show. I think you're kind of missing the point of what we do here on the Douglas Coleman Show, but there is one more, so let's see. Tell us about this last song, huh?
Oh, ja, den här nummer 1 sången i Sverige. Den kallas för du vaken Lars.
Well, okay. You know, I really hope that this song is good because, I don't know, the last two, they just, I don't know, they didn't quite hit me in the right spot. We'll see. Okay, so what's this one called again?
Kallas för du vaken Lars.
Du vaken Lars. All right.
Oh.
So this is really, really a good one, yeah? This is a great one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's listen to du vaken Lars.
Du vaken Lars, du vaken Lars, har du tvättat händerna, tvättat händerna? Du vaken Lars, du vaken Lars, har du borstat händerna?
Okay, are you kidding me? This is unbelievable. I just can't believe you would bring this to my show. I mean, come on. The songs went from bad to worse. I mean, this is outrageous. You have no concept of what it is that we do on this show here. I cannot believe this.
Yeah, you're better than ABBA or Roxette.
Better than ABBA. Well, I sort of doubt that.
Roxette. Ace of Base.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Goodbye, Olaf.
Barbie.
We'll be right back.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Go listen, download, and subscribe to The Douglas Coleman Show. It's available at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. Also on iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube. The Douglas Coleman Show is an internationally syndicated talk and music show that features fascinating and sometimes famous guests from all aspects of the entertainment industry. The topics can range from light and fluffy to sober and serious. Our focus is on music artists, but we also feature producers, authors, directors, and even promoters. The Douglas Coleman Show. Sometimes chat, sometimes music, always entertaining. Again, it's available today at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. You can also connect with them on Facebook at Douglas Coleman Show 1. Follow on Twitter at Douglas Coleman 3. Again, that's the Douglas Coleman Show at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and more. Go listen, download, subscribe, and share with your social networks today.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's EWPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me this spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
D. Grant Smith is the creator and host of the Appetizer Radio Show, syndicated across the United States and internationally. His experience in radio and media go back to 1997, when he was an oddball grunge punk rock kid in high school. Since then, he has worked with countless indie DIY musicians in growing their audience using radio airplay and direct-to-fan methods. He has written a book called The DIY Musician's Radio Handbook, Okay, please welcome D. Grant Smith. Hello, D. Grant. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Douglas. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. You've got a lot of things on your bio here that I wanted to talk about. Before we get to your show and your podcast and your book and all that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us your quick background, and then we'll get into what you do, actually.
Yeah. So I work primarily in radio, and I've been doing that since about 1997, 1998. My memory is kind of cloudy because I was in high school, and most of us don't remember everything we did in high school, or we kind of try not to. But I've been working in radio since I was in high school for the purpose of being able to have a better career when I got out of college, and those opportunities and experiences did open up some doors. Aside from music and aside from radio and all this stuff, which we're going to dive into in a minute, the big things that get me fired up are stories and conversations with people. And so I'm a relationship-driven person, and I firmly believe that success in any industry, especially in music, lies in and entertainment, lies in the quality and the depth of relationships that we build with other people, which is why being a part of your show, Douglas, and having a conversation about this stuff is so valuable and so important. So the big takeaway for me and who I am is I love getting to know new folks and building actual dialogue and conversations so we can see what kind of reciprocal connections can come out of that. And one thing that I do and that I'm very passionate about that is a conversation starter is I love Batman and I love boxing. And so if either of those two things are stuff that you're passionate about, we can find a way to talk about it in some form or fashion.
Well, Batman, yeah, I think I would be mildly passionate about. Boxing I like, but I only like Thai boxing, Muay Thai kickboxing.
Interesting.
I'm not a big fan of conventional boxing.
To each his or her own. So Thai boxing is mysterious to me and it's intriguing in a way because of all in a way it's kind of like MMA was before it became popular or whatever, but that's interesting. That's a conversation we can have sometime.
Yeah. Now, are you a musician?
Technically, yes. I play with a couple of really small bands in the town that I live in, but we are so sporadic in our performance and in our practice that I don't really talk about the musician side of things. I play drums. I know how to play guitar, and sometimes I use guitar as a therapeutic tool, but it's not something that I'm trying to do professionally or become, successful at in any way, shape, or form. For me, it's a therapy and, kind of community building resource to kind of get plugged into folks that I might not have the opportunity to get plugged into otherwise.
Now, you said you started your interest in radio when you were in high school. What exactly did you do in high school for radio?
Oh, man, that's a great question. So, I've always been a forward-thinking person and trying to figure out what I'm going to do before I actually have to do it. And part of that's family culture, and I think if any of your listeners grew up in the South at all, that's kind of something that it's really driven home in the South. Probably in other parts of the country too, but I know that in my family circles it really was. So when I was growing up, like I was always being asked, what did I want to do when I grew up? And it was like something I couldn't escape. When I realized I couldn't become a comic book artist because I wasn't really that skilled at art, and I couldn't figure out how to draw a movement very well, my interest kind of shifted over into music, and I thought, man, it'd be really awesome to be on the radio. And so through the grapevine, I found out about this opportunity to be on a college radio station in I was in a town called Sugar Land, which is a suburb of Houston, Texas. And just down the road, in Texas terms, that's about an hour away, just down the road. We're used to that kind of terminology. In other parts of the country, they're like, well, an hour away, that's a long drive. It wasn't too bad. But about 45 minutes to an hour down the road, a little town called Alvin, which its only claim to fame is it's where Nolan Ryan was born and from. But aside from that, nobody has heard of it at all, I don't think. But there's a little community college there, and they were willing to talk to me as a high school student about doing something on air for them. And I was being mentored in a way by a guy that was a Peabody Award winner for a big country station in Houston. We went to the same church together, and he would take me up to the studio to do his early morning on air shift that started about 4:30 a.m. And I was getting a little bit of experience doing that early in high school, but I wanted to take that experience to turn it into something bigger. And so the station actually talked to me, and their managers had a conversation with me, and they said, okay, if you're willing to drive out here at least once a week, we can find some place for you. And it started out as once an hour. I just gave a weather update, and I read like 2 news stories, and that was the extent of my work. But it got me over my fear of talking on air, and I sounded terrible. But it also helped it put me under the wing of some college students that were there. And they kind of raised me up, so to speak. And eventually I got good enough to where the station managers were like, okay, we'll give you your own show. And so a couple times a week, I would go out for about a 3-hour show. And that experience is what opened the door for me to be able to start on air as a freshman in college, where even at the small college I went to, that was something that wasn't done before.
Well, that's interesting. And it brings up a good point when you were talking about networking and getting to know people. I know that in the entertainment business, and that can be anything from a disc jockey to an actor to a musician, it's not who you know, but who knows you. You just exactly said that with the radio thing that you did when you were in high school. They got to know you.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting that you say that. Man, this is really cool. So there's a friend of mine who's a great music professional, and he's got a podcast called The Muse, MIEWS. His name's Shane Freeman. And he and I just had a conversation about this exact same thing last week, which is the old adage, it's not who you know, it's who knows you back that really is the important thing. And we oftentimes miss that in the realm of networking and relationship building and marketing and all that stuff. So it's so awesome that you mentioned that.
Well, it's very true. And it's you're right. People do tend to miss that because, okay, we all know who Paul McCartney is. Does he know you? Probably not. If he did, that would be a big step, right?
Right. Yes, exactly.
So it's very true. And I think that there is a certain art to networking with people because you have to be careful not to get classified as spam. You can send out 5,000 emails a day and people are going to put you on the spam list, and that's it. They're never going to hear from you again. On the other hand, you've got to do something interesting enough that's going to capture their attention that they will get to know you in some manner or another. This is one of the rants that I go on my show many times, especially with musicians, with indie musicians. The internet has created a double-edged sword for artists, okay? I'll use my famous quote. People who listen to my show regularly is like, oh, God, he's going to say that again. But it's really very true. The good news about technology for artists is that anyone can put their product out on the internet for the world to see. The bad news is that anyone can put their product out for the world to see.
Exactly.
And what's happened is that the market is so saturated with music. Music has become disposable. You know, people can knock up a song in 10 minutes on a computer and put it right there on the shelf next to the musician who has worked hours in the studio to capture a performance on tape or on, recorded. It's not fair. I mean, I'm probably a bit older than you. If you were in high school in 97, I was in high school in 77. So we're 20 years apart. I am also a musician. That's how I started. The radio show sort of came out of the music, or as a result of it, I suppose. We used to work, for hours and hours and hours to put a song together and really capture the performance and put it out there. And now all of a sudden the market is so saturated because of the internet that all of that work that we put in gets lost. And I feel sad about that because I think the less time humans put into a song, the more soulless the music is. If the computer created the whole song, it has no soul. It has no feeling from the artists themselves. The internet has saturated the market, so it is really more difficult. Even though there's more opportunity, there's more vehicles, it's really more difficult for you to be seen, I think.
You're absolutely right, man. And what I think is that I think you and I sit in very similar chairs in terms of the emails that we get from people all asking for something. And most of this coming from people that we've never seen, met, or had a conversation with before in our entire lives.
Right.
And they want something from us that has taken us a long time to build and a long time to create and a long time to curate and a long time to improve. And they want it all right now, and they want it for free. And the thing that technology, in my opinion, has the double-edged sword on the bad end is that it has really taken us not just 2 steps backward, but almost like 2 leaps or 2 miles backwards in terms of the way that we connect and communicate with each other. Because so much of what we do on social media is so driven by just us and ourselves. And the downside to all of the ways that you can now market yourself to new people and quote unquote grow followers and all that stuff is that it kind of takes exactly what you're talking about in terms of humanity. It takes the humanity out of the relationship and out of the communication that we're supposed to be doing in the first place, which is building communities and building collaboration and building dialogue with each other so we can all benefit from the connection instead of it just being something that helps one person. But that's exactly what you're talking about, and I agree with you 100%.
Well, look at it this way. How many people do you communicate with on the internet in one day? And how many people do you communicate face to face with?
Yeah, and that's totally changed. That's exactly right.
For me, I communicate with maybe 3 people face to face in one day, but I could have 100 emails to do. Yeah, we've become this sort of faceless society. You're not really a person. You're just your icon. You know, you're just your web page. You're not really a human being I don't mean literally, you know what I mean? I mean, this is sort of a mental image picture I'm painting. But it's true. We've become very desensitized. And I think it shows in the society, the way that violence is getting bigger all the time because people are so desensitized to it. You can turn on anything, you know, CNN and, you know, 20 more people were killed by a suicide bomber. It's like, oh, you know, just another day. I don't know. On the other hand, let's talk about the good side of the sword for a minute. That now it has enabled artists to get their stuff out there where that was not possible. And I'll tell you what, being from the 70s generation, it was really almost impossible even to get a good recording in those days because studios that rented out time to the public were few and far between, very expensive. The equipment was incredibly expensive. The first recording studio I ever went into, a professional recording studio, was in the early 80s, and it was in a guy's basement of his house. He always joked because he spent more for the equipment than he did for the house. You know, he spent over $50,000 for an 8-track studio with 1-inch tape, which is what, you know, people were using. The Beatles used a very similar machine when they made Let It Be and stuff. And, you know, he spent $30,000 for the house back in those days. So when I went into this studio, he had it all set up with the glass partitions and the soundproofing and everything. And I went in there and just went, wow. You know, I mean, I was about 19, 20 years old. I was just blown away. I was like, this is unbelievable. Well, now that same technology you could basically have on your iPhone. You know, you can get something pretty close to that. So anybody can make a decent demo now, which is great. We would do cassette demos and put them in an envelope and mail them off to record labels and hope they didn't get thrown in the bin. You know, that was how you did it back then. Now you can reach so many more people. But there is a ceiling. There is a wall. And this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Indie artists, indie musicians can get to a certain point. You can get a lot of people following you on Twitter. You can get, you know, hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube with your video. But there is a big gap between that and what a major label artist is doing. How do you break to the level? How do you get out? How do you get up that ladder?
That's a really big question. So part of it is understanding a lot of the difference between the two, and it's not just a matter of popularity or what you might consider to be popularity. It's also a matter of the personalities that are behind that promotion. And there are people who are Pharrell Williams is a good example. That guy looks like he's probably in his 20s, but he's not. He's in his 40s. And he made music and records and records and records and records for years and years and years. And then he finally, quote unquote, broke out. And so then all of a sudden he seems like this new face on the scene who is doing all this new stuff, and now he's all over the place. And that was, the story that broke out a couple of years ago when his hit song came out. But the reality of the situation is this, that guy was virtually unknown, and he just kept plugging away at it. And he was virtually unknown for a long time, except for in the circles that he was in. And his talent and his skill level is outstanding. And so by keeping doing what he was doing and continuing to build those relationships and to build those contacts, eventually the opportunity, when he had the opportunity to break out, it happened. And also, fortunately for him, since he had been in the game, I'm going to use that terminology, since he'd been in the game long enough to know the rules and how the rules change and how he could stay in longer, he hasn't fallen away and become a one-hit wonder or somebody that somebody's forgotten about, 6 months after the fact. Is there is there a science formula or a mathematical formula or equation that if you do X, Y, Z every single time, it's going to turn you into Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber and Katy Perry and all these people? No, there's not. If there were, there'd be a whole lot more of those individuals potentially out there. The thing that I think, and this is my experience and my opinion, rolled into one sandwich, is that success, again, totally lies in your ability to make human connections. And so that's not just human connections with media and with social media stuff. It's with real life human beings. And when you look at bands that 20 years ago, or let's be more blunt than that, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and all of those decades combined still had massive audience, massive following, and mass appeal, and continue to this day, are the same artists that some people hear and they're like, oh, why are those guys still playing? Well, their fans are still demanding it and they're still responding. And, obviously I'm talking about
Paul McCartney. He's still touring.
Rolling Stones come to mind easily. Bob Dylan.
Elton John is still playing.
Yeah. All of the legendary artists and even guys that were not necessarily legendary when they first started out, but they've come into their own and they still have massive appeal. Those people are responding to the call of their super fans, and that's where it all lies. So if you want to be successful, you've got to cultivate this core audience of people that no matter where you are, they want to hear you. And no matter what you're doing, no matter whether you're popular or not, actually, in some ways, they might prefer you not to be popular so that they can really dive more into your stuff. Because popular artists start to kind of sway away from the things that their core audience wants and tries to do things to appeal to this massive group of folks. But true success lies in your ability to connect with a core audience and continuing to build that relationship and that dynamic that will spread over time. These are the people. I recently talked to Kevin Kelly, who was one of the first proponents and theoretical ideologues, however you phrase that proposed the idea and the concept of 1,000 true fans. And the number can change, but it goes back into your connection with a core group of people that love you and support you and buy your music and buy your merchandise and attend your shows and evangelize on your behalf without you asking them to, or without you doing a bunch of social media stuff and without you paying for advertisement and all that stuff. And in the way that, what you're doing, Douglas, with your show and what I do on my show is, it propels that connection even further and gives artists an opportunity to make a connection with those types of fans. And those are a type of fans. Your mass audience, your mass group of music fans are not necessarily hardcore about anybody. Mass audience is just that. It's a massive group of people that kind of follow whatever is in front of them. But it's a different audience that follows you no matter where you go. And that's really the key.
Well, it's interesting. You said a lot of very interesting points there. one of them about the core fans, your true fans. I agree with that 100%. You've got to take those people with you wherever you go.
Exactly.
And social media has allowed you to do that. You know, back in the old days, they were called groupies that would follow the band around from city to city to city, okay? Well, now they can just follow you online. Let me ask you this then about indie musicians. I know that a lot of indie musicians can make a good living. The landscape has changed, okay? People don't really buy music anymore. So in order for musicians to make money, they have to perform live. That's the only thing they can do to generate. Now, oddly enough, ironically enough, when musicians go to a venue and play live, people buy the CD at the door. And that's what's really funny. Musicians have told me they sell many more CDs at the door of their concerts than they do on iTunes or Amazon.
Right.
So that whole thing has changed. Okay, but this is one way that musicians can make money is to tour, where before you could sell records and make a decent living. There is a big gap, it seems, between someone like Taylor Swift and some indie musician who's going around from bar to bar to bar playing. There's also a gap in the way that they're paid on things like YouTube. And the elusive YouTube ad revenue share program is something that I've tried to figure out with other people, and we haven't a clue. If you've got any insight on that, please tell us, because I am dying to figure out what their formula is for how they pay people. I'll give you an example. I know a friend of mine who runs an indie record label. He put a band out that was really, really hot. They were from Atlanta. And they put out their first video, got 2.5 million views on YouTube in like a week, which is pretty phenomenal for anybody. And they thought, oh, wow, they're going to get this big check from YouTube for the ad revenue, right? When their check came finally, like 9 months later, they got $627.
Uh-huh.
And they thought, what the F, right? I mean, how could this possibly be? So there is some sort of a formula, and I've got it narrowed down to it's between views, subscriptions, and comments. And you've got to have a ratio. You can't have 2.5 million views and 3 comments. Or you can't have 2.5 million views and 10 subscribers. You've got to have something that kind of matches up. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any information on that one?
I've got a couple of theories, and I'll share those theories in a moment. I first want to address a couple points you made before we started talking about the YouTube stuff. So in regards to touring and people not buying music, I think we're still talking about some of the same stuff here. Your mass music audience isn't buying music like it used to. It doesn't have to. Now it wants to just be entertained in the moment. And it also wants to save space on its limited, their limited cell phones and mobile devices, which now have storage capacities that are not being filled up with games and programs and apps and all that kind of stuff. So they don't have as much space for holding on to actual song files. So they're not buying stuff through iTunes or Apple Music or whatever as much as they were before, because now the space is limited. And also because of streaming platforms letting you create playlists and follow certain artists and listen to just one artist that you like all day long. It's kind of doing what commercial radio was trying to sort of do, and just being very boring in its programming type. These streaming services have kind of the capability of doing that. So all of that has helped to curb the way that media is consumed, music is consumed. There are still people buying CDs. There's still people buying vinyl. The simple fact that there are mail order programs like Vinyl Me, and there's like 3 or 4 other ones that are specifically just vinyl mail delivery things you subscribe to and you get vinyl delivered to you. There are record shops, indie record shops, that are popping up all over the place that are carrying tons and tons and tons of records, like old-fashioned vinyl records and CDs. And they, in any place that sells a combination of books and magazines and CDs, every store that I go into, even in small towns, there are people lined up buying stuff. That tells me that these reports that people aren't buying music anymore is bull dog crap. What it also tells me is that those people are different than the mass media, mass music audience because they want a different experience. And the people that have always bought records and CDs and taken them home and listening to them, instead of just tuning into whatever the radio is playing and that being their music consumption, they want an experience from the artist that they're listening to. And that ties back into the whole idea of the true fan, the core audience. They want to experience not just your music, they want to experience your story and the way that your story and your music connects with their story and who they are. Most of the time, the artists that we're the most passionate about, that we become super fans of, they tell our personal story in ways that we can't. And that's why we're so plugged into them, and that's why we're so passionate. So all of that to say that musicians can still make money by selling their music. They need to be specific about the audience that they're targeting. And yes, you're right. They do need to be getting in front of people. So that ties back into the other thing that we talked about when we first started having our conversation, where our interaction online has kind of changed the way that we dynamic and interact with people in real life. And so if we spend our music careers or our entertainment careers or whatever it is, just sitting behind a computer and recording ourselves in video or in audio and then putting that out for this digital audience to consume, we're not giving them the same experience that we can when we do something in real time, in real life, face to face, mano a mano, and have that exchange and have that experience. And that's really what real music fans are craving, which is why when they come to your show, they buy your music, they buy your merchandise, and they want to start a relationship with you. And sometimes that's following you on some sort of social media platform, but more likely than not, they want to have a conversation with you and feel like they are as connected to you in real life as they seem to be in their minds. And so all of that to say that's you have to combine a lot of these different things to build what your strategy is going to be for how you can have a successful music career. So that's one part of what you were asking and we were talking about. Over in the YouTube and let's tie in SoundCloud plays and Bandcamp and these other digital media platforms where it seems to be driven in terms of the way that you're paid in royalties and licensing and all that stuff seems to be driven by numbers, both numbers of followers and numbers of plays. I don't know the truth behind how all those algorithms work, but based on what you just told me in terms of story and the stories that I've heard from other people too, it seems like it's the same thing with like having, so on Twitter, for instance, I spend a lot of time on Twitter trying to have conversations with folks. And I love having actual conversations, dialogue with people on Twitter because you get to meet some really awesome folks that are doing some really incredible things and you get to build collaborative relationships. But there are folks that are on there that are trying to sell a version of themselves that aren't true. So if you go to their profile and it says they've got like 500,000 followers, but you see their posts and their posts don't have any engagement whatsoever. And then their posts are about music that they've created and you're listening to it and you're like, what is this and why are people following me? Why did this follower button and see that there are tons of bots and quote unquote paid accounts or whatever that they've bought followers. That's not a real representation of their actual audience. And you can do the exact same thing on YouTube. So there's some musicians that I've worked with that have done that. They've paid for advertisement to get their videos and their content in front of tons of people, and they've got all the views and stuff, but it hasn't translated into actual connection with real life fans. And I think that part of the algorithm and part of the payout probably has a little bit to do with how long were those people actually engaged? Were those views, if it's 2.5 million, did they watch the whole video or did they watch 10 seconds of it and move on to the next thing that was in their feed or whatever the case may be? I don't know exactly how the algorithm works. If it were me, I would not be relying on any sort of digital media platform to give me any sort of royalty thing that is going to, make or break my budget. For me, that would just be like, hey, I got an extra $600 9 months down the road. Cool. Let's find a way to invest this back into the music so we can create some more reality. But in terms of algorithm stuff and how you quantify that and figure out how to make it work so that you can then manipulate it, by the time you figure out the algorithm and how it works, they will have changed it 4 times. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. I think that you and I are in agreement on that. It is about actual engagement. People can buy, like you said, people can buy fans and people can buy numbers and statistics. Now, I don't say that they did that. I mean, I think this band legitimately got 2.5 million views, but it was very quick, and perhaps that was why they didn't get paid so much, because it was their first video. They were the new kids on the block, so to speak. And, I'm sure YouTube took that into account. I'm sure they did advertising. I'm sure that they, that little tag that comes up while you're watching one video and it tells you to go to another one. You can pay for that. Yeah, I'm sure it was definitely something like that. I want to get to your shows. You've got actually two. Now, you've got one podcast and one radio show. Your radio show is called The Appetizer Radio Show. Your podcast is called The DIY Artist Route. What's the difference between the two?
Well, the radio show is heard on public radio and indie radio stations, FM stations, and a couple of web stations all across the country, and a couple that are international. It's a weekly 2-hour show. The focus of the radio show is on great albums. And so I do a combination of showcasing new and emerging DIY and unsigned independent musicians. And I also pair that with album cuts from really talented and fairly well-known musicians. But I don't do pop hits. I've never been a fan of pop music, even when I was working for a somewhat pop station back in the high school days. We played a lot of popular music on that station. But I've never been a fan of what's popular, not because I'm trying to be some sort of hipster underground person. It's just I don't. It doesn't connect with me very well. And so what I saw, and the transition for The Appetizer happened. We've always been about music discovery, and we play on a food metaphor that is we eat different types of food for our health every single day. We should listen to different types of music. We should put different types of sound and storytelling in our ears. Our minds and our hearts need that for our own health. And so I've been playing on that metaphor for we're approaching our 13th year in September. But I saw a kind of a bend in the road about a year and a half ago where some of the things people are talking about a lot now, which is people aren't as passionate about the album anymore. And I think as a whole, that's probably true. There's a lot of artists that aren't even recording albums anymore. They're just doing singles, or if they do a collection of songs, it's just 2 or 3 on a very short EP or something like that. But there are still great artists that are making amazing albums. And so I have I have modified my radio show to be a showcasing of great albums. And every single episode is a celebration of great albums. I'm only allowed by the FCC to play cuts from the same album. I can only do 2 cuts in a 1-hour span of time. And so I push that envelope every single week. I do cuts from the same album, 2 cuts from an album in each hour. And then I talk about the experience. I talk about the artist. I talk about why the album is awesome. And I encourage my listeners who are also music super fans. That's who I'm appealing to. That's why it's so valuable to get in front of certain types of radio and certain types of media, because they have certain types of audience. My audience is music super fans, and they buy records, and they listen to me because they're trusting that I'm going to tell them about a record that they should add to their collection. And so that's what The Appetizer is all about. The DIY artist route, you said route, I say route, potato. But that is a podcast that really started out as a way for me to take interviews and conversations that I was having with musicians and be able to put that in front of a side of my audience that wants to hear those conversations but didn't want to take away from the content of the radio show. And so it really started out with, I've been friends with independent singer-songwriter William Fitzsimmons for a long time. And about once a year at least, he and I have a really long conversation about music and life and all kinds of stuff. And he was telling me all these insights into his own personal story, and we were talking about business and the relationship that music and his music has with what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to be a successful musician. And so from that conversation came the DIY Artist Drop podcast. And so since then, I've had conversations with folks like Benji Rogers, the founder of Pledge Music, Jay and Chandler Coyle, who are both Berkeley Online professors in music marketing, and also amazing networking and music marketing people. Best-selling author in marketing Seth Godin, other musicians like Jersey Jung, and Matthew Mayfield and folks like that. But what I do is I focus on the story and focus on people that have built something on their own and can share some unique insights, because we're all in this creative space trying to figure out how to move forward. And the best way to learn sometimes is to learn from each other. And so I'm very particular about the people that I bring on the show, on the podcast, to talk about specific ways to grow. And that's what that's all about.
So where can people find your radio show and your podcast?
The radio show is at appetizerradio.com. You can actually also take the show and our archive with you anywhere you go by grabbing us on the App Store in Apple. It's just the Appetizer Radio app. And those are the two easiest places to grab us, because even though we are on FM and indie radio, we're also living in an on-demand world, and so the show is available online, much the same as most radio shows these days. And as for the podcast, you can also get that on iTunes. Just do a search for DIY Artist Route. You can also get it on Stitcher and Spreaker, or you can go to my website, which is dgrantsmith.com.
Okay, super. And one of the things you called yourself here is audience growth farmer. I really like that. I think that's really clever.
I've got to give kudos to Seth Godin for that. So in our conversation, he framed the work that I've been doing for the past decade plus around this concept of farming for growth instead of hunting for it. And I encourage your listeners and your audience to check out that podcast episode, because in 17 minutes, Seth says more truth than most people spend their careers writing books about. And it's very, very small, palatable, palpable, and powerful. But yeah, that the audience growth farmer, once he said that, I was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense.
Well, it's a great picture. I can just see if you had a cartoon of that, you would see people popping up in a cornfield, like heads or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure. If you've got some graphic artists listening, I am open to talking about graphic arts ideas, because I did aspire at one point to be a comic book artist when I was like 10 years old, but my art skills ended right about then. And I'm very big on the concept of, on the subject of farming, the concept of the keyhole garden. My wife is a master gardener, and she writes an amazing blog, which is keepingupwithmrssmith.com. But I learned about this thing from her. It started in the Sudan, and in that region, which is similar to the region that I'm in Texas, we don't get much rainfall every year. And these people built these 3-foot high gardens they're about 3 foot high, and they're about 6 feet wide. And they're mostly made out of like plastic bottles and bricks and stuff like that. But they feed whole villages by planting specific things inside these keyhole gardens, and the movement has started to spread over into the States. But in the same ways that you can feed an entire village in this very small little plot of land, if you are particular about what you plant and how you plant it, and you focus on the soil, you can do the exact same thing with your music career by focusing on a very specific group of people. And so that's kind of what I've built my practice around.
Well, listen, we are out of time for this interview. It just zoomed right by. We could have went on for at least another hour. Maybe I'll extend my show to a 2-hour show. But thank you so much for coming on. This was a real pleasure to talk to you. And I'd like to have you back on the show so we could sort of do part 2 of this conversation, because I think there's a lot more that we could talk about.
Yeah, I would love that. I'd love to make a shameless plug if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I've done that anyways, but what Douglas and I have talked about in this conversation, having everything to do with being very specific about the audience that you're reaching out to, building a core audience of super fans or true fans or whatever you want to call them, and building collaborative relationship connections with folks is what I show artists how to do in my book, the DIY Radio Musician's Handbook. It's not just about how to get radio promotion. The book inside the book is how to build really strong relationships with people. It's both radio contacts, media influencers, music industry influencers, and real life fans. And so you can get the book at my website, dgrantsmith.com. Thanks for the plug.
No problem. Okay, thanks again. Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, D. Grant Smith, and thank you to Ryan Sullivan of the North. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the